Hello, welcome to this video on the ongoing issue of the road through Syunik, the Trump route for international peace and prosperity trip, or the Zangezur Corridor. My name is Nareg Seferian. I hold a PhD from Virginia Tech's School of Public and International Affairs. And let me take you to this part of the world called the Caucasus. It is often referred to as a crossroads at the geopolitical juncture of Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Over the past few thousand years, the Caucasus has had a long history of being conquered by various empires, while also being home to a number of different cultures and identities with their own kings and lords, their own independent states, joined sometimes by waves of settlers from near and far. In the more recent past, the Romanov Empire moved into this region, competing with Ottoman, Turkish, and Persian control. I'm using maps placed on Wikimedia Commons. Special thank you to all those users who provided the materials there. Here's one showing the administrative territorial divisions of the region in 1917, still under the Tsar. After the revolutions that year, three independent countries were recognized by world powers: Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. But in just a couple of years, they fell to Bolshevik control and became a part of the Soviet Union. Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan became independent when the USSR collapsed in 1991. The territorial disputes that inform the Caucasus today stem from the political geography of the Soviet Union. So let me share that map with you all now. Certain decisions were made in the 1920s, the repercussions of which are still felt today. For this video, let us focus on three areas that have been disputed between the local Armenian and Azerbaijani populations and governments. First, this section to the west, called Nakhichevan or Nakhchivan, it had autonomous status within Soviet Azerbaijan and is a part of the independent Republic of Azerbaijan today. It has a long external border with Iran and a very short border with Turkey, about 17 kilometers or 11 miles in its northwestern corner. The second area disputed back then is called Syunik or Zangezur, with which Nakhichevan has a lengthy mountainous border. Syunik became an integral part of Soviet Armenia and is a province of the independent Republic of Armenia today. As you can see, Nakhichevan is an exclave of Azerbaijan. It is separated from the rest of Azerbaijan by Syunik. The southern end of Syunik is Armenia's border with Iran at about 44 kilometers or 27 miles. The Nakhichevan Iran and Syunik Iran border follow the river valley of the Araks or the Araz River, which flows further into Azerbaijan. The third disputed area, the region of Karabakh, a majority Armenian populated territory, was designated by the leadership of the USSR, acquiring for its part an autonomous status within Soviet Azerbaijan. This is the Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Oblast or region, the NKAO. It was carved out as this kind of kidney-shaped territory, and it was just a few kilometers away from Soviet Armenia at their closest point to each other. As the USSR collapsed in the late 1980s, early 1990s, the demands of the Armenian population of the NKAO to join Armenia led to hostilities and war. The NKAO declared itself an independent Republic of Nagorno-Karabakh, or in Armenian, Artsakh. By the summer of 1994, When the hostilities of the First Karabakh War ended, there was a ceasefire, and these are the ceasefire lines. The unrecognized Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, or NKR, had effective control over the NKAO, or most of it, and as well as a lot of surrounding territories, which had been a part of Soviet Azerbaijan proper, and this included a lot of the Araks River Valley bordering Iran. Negotiations and peace talks continued for 25 years or so with little change on the ground. There were frequent episodes of shootings across the lines of control. Bigger escalations occurred as well, especially in the 2010s. In September 2020, Azerbaijani forces launched an assault with the support of Turkey with equipment from Israel and Syrian mercenaries. The assault was on a very large scale. What's called the Second Karabakh War lasted about 6 weeks, and a lot of Nagorno-Karabakh held territory was taken over by Azerbaijan as a result. There was a ceasefire agreement negotiated with the mediation of President Putin of Russia. It resulted in a smaller area. You can see here in the brighter beige or orange shade. An Armenian population still lived here, patrolled by Russian peacekeepers. Azerbaijani forces moved into the surrounding areas, including the border with Armenia on the eastern borders of Syunik. There was one road connecting Armenia to what remained of Armenian populated Nagorno-Karabakh, going through this area called Berzor or Lachin. In December 2022, Azerbaijan imposed a blockade on what remained of Armenian-populated Nagorno-Karabakh after 9 months in September 2023, despite the presence of the Russian peacekeepers. Azerbaijani forces mounted an assault on Nagorno-Karabakh. The authorities of Nagorno-Karabakh relented, and over the course of the following weeks, more than 100,000 Armenians fled the territory, taking refuge in Armenia or moving on elsewhere. Azerbaijan retains effective control of what used to be the Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Region and its surrounding areas, and has even made some incursions into the territories of Armenia. Let me pause here for a moment to say that the wars over Karabakh have been quite horrific, killing, displacing, and otherwise harming hundreds of thousands of Azerbaijani and Armenian civilians. For the sake of time, please note that I have left out significant details in this video, and I am not doing justice to the tragedies that those wars represent. Peace negotiations between Baku and Yerevan have gone back and forth since 2020, 2021, sometimes with mediation from Russia, sometimes European powers have moved in, sometimes the United States, and there have been very limited on-the-ground changes. The sticking points include the fate of prisoners of war and former leaders of the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, the presence of Azerbaijani military forces on Armenian territory, and the right of return of Armenians to their homes. The Azerbaijani government, for its part, insists that Armenia amend its constitution to remove references to Nagorno-Karabakh. There is also talk of the facilitation of the return of Azerbaijanis who used to live in Soviet Armenia. One of the most important components has been access to the exclave, to Nakhichevan or Nakhchivan, and Azerbaijan proper. The Azerbaijani side has insisted on some sort of corridor, an unimpeded sovereign road through Syunik or Zangezur following the Araks River Valley. This corridor arrangement would have been analogous with the corridor arrangement that Armenia had with Nagorno-Karabakh farther north, the Berzor or Lachin corridor. But that correspondence ceased to exist following the September 2023 attacks and the exodus of the Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh. On the Armenian side, the Crossroads of Peace proposal implies a general opening up of all borders and lines of communication in the region. Armenia's land borders with Turkey have been closed since the Karabakh War of the 1990s. Yerevan insists on opening all the roads and railways and developing infrastructure for the entire region, with each country controlling its own territory. This proposal has not been explicitly echoed by Baku. There have been significant developments in 2025. In March, the two sides declared that they had agreed on the text of the peace treaty between them. In August, President Trump of the United States witnessed the reaffirmation by the leaders of the countries to peace and signed bilateral agreements as well with Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan of Armenia and President Aliyev of Azerbaijan at the White House. Among the outcomes of that meeting was agreement on what has been called now the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity, or TRIPP. An American private company is meant to manage and develop the road between Azerbaijan proper and Nakhichevan through Syunik. This arrangement met with great approval from the governments of Armenia and Azerbaijan, the United States, Turkey, and Western actors. For the other important geopolitical actors in the region, however, namely Russia and Iran, an American presence on the ground is not welcome. The Caucasus continues to be a space of competition and rivalry among Western powers and regional players, with interests all the way to India and China. The so-called Middle Corridor is useful to point out in this regard. It is one of many transportation infrastructure projects that are being developed as alternatives to major, well-established shipping lanes, as multimodal highways, railways, and water routes that, most significantly, bypass Russia and Iran. More than another way to send goods across the Eurasian continent, the Zangezur Corridor, or TRIP, is framed in Azerbaijani and Turkish discourse as a great connector across the Turkic world into Central Asia. There is an ideological narrative that is compelling for national segments of society in the Turkic-speaking world, something that is a cause of anxiety in Armenia and also in Iran and Russia. Nationalist mobilization of the Azerbaijani population in Iran or of Turkic populations in Russia, or the overall loss of influence of Russia in Central Asia, are all compelling concerns in Tehran and Moscow. There are thus quite far-reaching implications to consider with the Zangezur Corridor, or TRIP. A number of questions still remain. What will a lasting peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan look like? The leadership in Armenia has a substantial legitimacy issue. The opposition rhetoric in the country is strong and opposed to the many concessions that Yerevan has made. Elections will be held in Armenia by mid-2026 at the latest. The leadership in Azerbaijan, meanwhile, often expresses rather harsh anti-Armenian rhetoric. Its human rights record is very discouraging. What will happen to the Armenian prisoners of war or the displaced Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh? Will Russia or Iran indeed make any moves to oppose the development of TRIP? What will be the role of Turkey, which has consistently supported the Azerbaijani position? Will the Zangezur Corridor, or TRIP, initiate the opening of all borders among Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Turkey, or will it in effect be used as a means to circumvent Armenia after all? What will TRIP mean for the border between Armenia and Iran? a space of strategic significance for both Yerevan and Tehran? How will the American management of the route deal with consumer goods passing through versus military equipment or other goods with strategic significance? These, and I am sure many other details, remain to be worked out. The developments on the ground will be quite consequential regionally and globally as well. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video.